Council will welcome public comment on the two items for closed session. City Attorney Chopra.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, the City Council will be meeting on two items in closed session. The first is item 2.1, conference with real property negotiator, section 54956.8. The property is 165 Moffett Boulevard, APN number 158-44002. Negotiating party, Silver Michael E. Trustee, Silver Claire M. Trustee. Agency negotiator, Angela LaMonica, Real Property Program Administrator. Under negotiation, price and terms of payment for acquisition of real property. And item 2.2, conference with labor negotiators, Government Code Section 54957.6, agency designated representatives, City of Mountain View, Assistant City Manager Audrey Seymour Ramberg, Human Resources Director Sue Rush and Charles Sakai, Sloan Sakai, Young and Wong LLP, employee organizations, Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 521, the Eagles Association, the Police Officers Association, POA, the International Association of Firefighters, IAFF, Local 1965, unrepresented fire managers, unrepresented police managers, unrepresented department heads, and unrepresented confidential employees. Is there any public comment for either of these two items tonight?
Okay, and I'm going to read, I think, what we need to for public comment. Is that correct? So as noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments by signing up at mountainview.gov/cc_speakers or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering webinar ID 984-4280-8738. Any emails received by 5 p.m. today were forwarded to the City Council. Emails received after 5 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on the two closed session items? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. All right. I don't see any hands raised, and I don't think we have anyone on the line, correct? Okay. All right. So this concludes public comment for both items under closed session, and council will reconvene during this link for closed session, for the regular session. Great. Thank you. Meeting of February 9th, 2021. I'm going to read the usual announcement as required, so please bear with me. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the State of California Executive Order N-29-20, dated March 17th, 2020. All members of the City Council are participating in this meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so at mountainview.legistar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast Channel 26. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments during the public comment period for the item by signing up at mountainview.gov/cc_speakers or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering webinar ID 984-4280-8738. Any emails received by 5 p.m. today were forwarded to the City Council. Emails received after 5 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. Now we'll move on to item the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we have the interim city clerk please pull up the picture of the flag? Great, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice and liberty for all. Great, thank you so much. So we'll move on to item number 2, which is roll call, and the city clerk will take attendance by roll call.
Councilmember Abekoga.
Here.
Councilmember Hicks.
Here.
Councilmember Lieber.
Here.
Councilmember Matichak.
Here.
Councilmember Showalter.
Here.
Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Here.
Mayor Kamei.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll move on to item 3, which is presentations. And for item 3, we have a proclamation in recognition of African American History Month. And joining us today is Milan R. Ballantyne, the Executive Director of the African American Community Services Agency. But before we move on to the proclamation, I wanted to share some of the things that the City of Mountain View is doing to celebrate Black History Month. Our city library has a Celebrate Black Culture and History with our collections. We've created a list of books and media celebrating Black culture and history. These can be found on our homepage under Explore Selected Collections. We also have a page at the library website featuring materials for all ages on the topics of racial equity and justice. You can follow the library on social media for other recommendations, and they also have selected collections that you can choose from. So yay! Hi, Mr. Ballantyne. It's good to see you. You've been moved over, which is lovely. So yes, we can hear you. Lovely, great, thank you. So before, I just wanted to make sure you were over before we read the proclamation, which I'll do so now. So this is a City of Mountain View proclamation, whereas February is designated as African American History Month and is observed in a diverse community and local schools with a series of special presentations and exhibits. And whereas this observance affords a special opportunity for all to become more knowledgeable about the African American heritage and to honor the many African Americans who contribute to the progress of our nation and our community. And whereas such knowledge can strengthen the insight of all our citizens regarding issues of human rights, the great strides that have made to eliminate the barriers to equality for all ethnic groups, and the continuing struggle against racial discrimination. Now, therefore, I, Ellen Kamei, Mayor of the City of Mountain View, along with my colleagues on the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of February as African American History Month in our community, expressing special commendation to the committees, schools, and dedicated volunteers who make this observance a reality in our area. Mr. Ballantyne, did you want to share any remarks with us?
Yes, Honorable Mayor, congratulations on your new position, and thank you to the honorable council members who are here, as I know you are all committed to the people of the City of Mountain View and those in Santa Clara County. It is just an honor to be with you today to celebrate African American contributions here in America, and to be recognized as one of our most important cities in the county is always important to AACSA. And I want to thank you, the previous mayor and the mayor before, who have sat with me and walked with me through this journey in making sure that we recognize these contributions. The African American Community Service Agency is definitely here for the people of Mountain View and serves the people of Mountain View, although we are in a huge county. I would like to say for Black History Month that I'm reminded by Michelle Obama to remind everybody that don't be afraid, be focused, be determined, be hopeful, be empowered. And the First Lady reminded us that no matter what we are doing, that our history and Black history and the Black community is about continuing despite all odds. And so we do appreciate what you all are doing and recognizing our contributions today.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do for our community. Yes, we can give you some virtual rounds of applause. Thank you so much.
Virtual hugs.
Yes, as close as we can get these days, virtual hugs.
Yeah.
So at this time, would any member of the public on the line like to provide public comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Okay. All right, I don't see any. But thank you so much, Mr. Ballantine, for coming and gracing us with your presence and highlighting all the contributions that you, as well as the African American Community Services Agency, do. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And please, people, get your PPE and protect yourself from the coronavirus.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to item 3.2, which is our COVID-19 update by City Manager Kimber McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I'm going to share my screen now. So I am here to present the latest COVID-19 update tonight for February 9th. And I will try and just highlight the most high-level changes that have happened since my last update. So as I usually do, just starting with the numbers right now, countywide, we're at about 105,000 deaths, and in Mountain View, cases, 1,500, little over 1,500 deaths, unfortunately. And for hospitalizations right now, we're at 326. So we are starting to see a trend going down, which I'll show you on another slide. So there is a little bit of good news there. In Mountain View, we're at a little over 2,600 positive cases right now. So this is a new dashboard that the county has put on their website. So I mentioned before that the county now has interactive vaccine data on their website where you can see exactly how many vaccines they've given out. And now what they've done is show the actual number of cases. So right here you can see from March 2020 over on the far left, how much the rolling average, the 7-day rolling average of cases was. And then you can see that huge spike in January 2021 on the right side after the holidays, where our high countywide, we got up to 1 day, 2,256 cases, if you remember that. So the good news is, looking at the far right on the slide, we are starting to go down. It is obviously still a higher number than we had over the summer and of course in the spring, but at least it is showing some semblance of a trend going down, which is hopeful. We are still in that purple tier as of February 7th. We're averaging about 32 new COVID cases a day. The positivity rate right now is 4.9%. So this has also gone down from that high we saw after the holiday period. You can see that in the far right column is where that is the middle column is where the percentage of tests are. So that's that positivity rate and where you're put in the different tiers. Then in the first column is the adjusted case rate. So that's that 7-day average of total cases. So most of the counties across the state still are in that purple tier, and we're not going to change out of that until our positivity rate goes down even further. I do also want to remind everyone that sccfreevax.org is the county website where you can go see what tier you're in, and you can also go make appointments or get links to make appointments to your medical care provider. So right now, the eligibility for folks who can get vaccines is anyone in phase 1A, so healthcare workers, long-term care facility workers and residents, and also just recently anyone who's over the age of 65 right now. So the good news about that, as we talked about in our last update, we do have a vaccine clinic open at our community center in partnership with the county. So right now there's what's called no wrong door policy. So anyone over the age of 65 can go get vaccinated anywhere. So that means that you can come to our community center to get vaccinated regardless of where your healthcare is. So this is recent news that the county just changed this policy. It is still by appointment only, so there's no walk-ups available. available, and it's Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. And we've been open for about 1 week, and we have 2,600, a little over 2,600, almost 2,700 vaccines that have been administered. So I mentioned last time that as we've ramped up county-wide, that the will is there, the infrastructure is there. What is not yet there is the supply. So that does still continue to be the biggest hurdle county-wide, but we are anticipating to be vaccinating up to around 1,000 vaccines per day. So we're almost there. I think we're a little over 800 and some vaccines that occurred just this past day. So we'll probably get to 1,000 vaccines very shortly. So this is the vaccine dashboard that I mentioned earlier. So you can go on the site at the SEC Free Vax. There's basically parts on the right side of the screen that you can toggle between that takes you to data, appointments. You can also go to the Santa Clara County Public Health website, and it has links to all of this information. Essentially, what you see in the blue graph are the number of people in the county that have received the first dose of the vaccine. So the green color stacked on top of it are the people that have received the second dose. So you can see right now that percent of residents that are 16 and older who have fully completed the vaccine is only 2.7%. So we still have quite a ways to go to get to the numbers that we need to get more people vaccinated to reach that stage that we're really coming out of the pandemic. But if you are interested in learning more about the numbers, this is a great tool to find out. So there's also testing going on. So just a reminder that we are still doing a lot of testing events at our Mountain View Center for the Performing Arts. The next one is February 16th. This is in partnership with the county. It's from 9:30 to 4. You can just go to sccfreetest.org to make your appointment. And so far, just this year, we've done almost 2,000 tests, about 1,900 tests. So please make sure that you're going to get a test. You will get a flu test as well as a COVID test at the same time. Then just pivoting to updates about a couple of our programs underway right now. I do want to let the community know that our small business grant program is still open. Applications are being accepted, and the deadline is Sunday, February 14th. So this Sunday is the deadline to turn your application in. And as of Friday, February 5th, we have received about 83 applications. And just a reminder, this is funded with $250,000 that council approved, and we expect that it will fund at least 50 small businesses to get $5,000 grants each. And those will be selected through a double-blind lottery system. So once we get all of the applications in and staff goes through everything, then we'll be granting the grants and announcing the winners. We also hosted a webinar last week, and it was attended by about 18 businesses. So we'll still continue to work with the chamber and push this out through all of our social channels, but we are excited that that's still going on. Then I also wanted to let the community know that we do have 2 advisory body recruitments open right now. So our rental housing committee and our public safety advisory body, or excuse me, advisory board are recruiting right now. So applications are open currently, and the deadline to apply is 5 p.m. on Friday, February 26th. You can get to the rental housing committee application through the rental housing committee section of the website, which is under the city council tab. And you can also get to the public safety advisory board application through the advisory body tab of our website. So as I said, February 26th is the deadline for that. And then I also wanted to thank and highlight the great work of our library department. So I know that many of you know I've been highlighting the work of staff for several meetings now, and our library staff has just done wonderful, amazing work in keeping our grab and go program going. We hit a peak in December where there were almost 2,000 materials checked out or given out through our grab and go program in just one day, and it was almost 500 people, I believe. So we're really happy that we're still able to provide this service to the community, along with all those really wonderful things that we're still doing virtually for the community through Facebook and through online webinars, and even the items that the mayor announced at the beginning of this meeting in celebration of African American History Month. So thank you to all of our great library staff. And then lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have a weekly briefing that goes out, and you can text MV COVID to 22828 and sign up with your email, and you get the briefing sent directly to your email, and it is optimized for a mobile device or a tablet device to read it. And that information is any latest COVID updates that come in, along with certain updates for the city and city news and business that's happened. So with that, that ends my COVID update, and just remind everyone to mask up NV and continue to do what we need to do to stay safe and healthy. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you so much, City Manager McCarthy. Does council have any questions for the city manager? Okay. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide a public comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. All right. Seeing no questions and seeing no public comment, we can close this item and move on to item 4, which is the consent calendar. These items will be approved by one motion unless any member of the public wishes to remove an item for discussion. The reading of the full text of resolutions and ordinances will be waived unless a council member requests otherwise. So at this time, would any member of the council like to pull an item? Okay, would any member of the public on the line like to provide public comment on an item on the consent calendar? If so, please feel free to click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Okay. All right, seeing none. And do we have anyone on the line? I don't see anyone on the line. All right, Councilmember Abikoga.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and move the consent calendar, including 4.2, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mountain View approving the final map of tract number 10550, 410-414 Sierra Vista Avenue, accepting dedications and making findings as required by the City Code to be read in title only, for the reading waived, which is attachment 1 to the council report. And 4.4, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mountain View acknowledging receipt of a report made by the Fire Chief of the Mountain View Fire Department regarding the inspection of certain occupancies required to perform annual inspections in such occupancies, pursuant to sections 13146.2 and 13146.3 of the California Health and Safety Code, to be read in title only, further reading waived, and that is attachment 1 to the council report. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Ramirez.
I'll second the motion.
Great. So we have a motion by Councilmember Abikoga and a second by Vice Mayor Ramirez. May we have a roll call vote, Ms. von der Linden?
Yes, Mayor Kamei. Councilmember Abikoga.
Aye.
Councilmember Hicks.
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber.
Aye.
Councilmember Matichak.
Yes.
Councilmember Showalter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Yes.
Mayor Kamei.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. von der Linden. So now we'll move to item 5, which is oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the council from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide public comment on non-agenda items? If so, please click the blue raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. And the city clerk will display a timer on the screen for 3 minutes. All right, I see one hand up. And Ms. von der Linden, do we have the timer ready? Okay, great. So Diane Gazzano. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Diane Gazzano, and I have lived in Mountain View since the 1960s. Recently, I had the opportunity to learn a little about the East Wisman Precise Plan. I marveled at the details of the plan, how the plan strived to create a sense of community, and how it planned for integration into the surrounding community. Now I live in the adjacent community, which is the Willowgate community. I've owned my townhouse there for 45 years. I believe our neighborhood, which is being eyed by developers, is very much in need of a precise plan. How is our neighborhood going to be developed? And how is it going to be integrated into the surrounding community? And who is going to make these decisions? This weekend, I was on the city website, and I jumped for joy when I read about the Mountain View strategic planning and vision process. I live on Cypress Point Drive, and we have been struggling to find a way to communicate with the city regarding our thoughts on the rezoning of 555 Littlefield. I would like to make the suggestion that the rezoning of 555 Littlefield, a precise plan discussion, be incorporated into the February-March focus groups that the city is planning. I think it would be very beneficial if the community could have such a conversation with the city before rezoning in our neighborhood begins. Thank you very much for listening to me and my thoughts on the Willowgate community.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gazzano. All right, and I don't see any other people with their hands up and checking in. There's no one on the line. Okay, and there's no one on the line. So I'll close oral communications and we can move to item 6, which is a public hearing. Item 6.1 is the density bonus ordinance. We'll begin with a staff presentation from Senior Planner Eric Anderson and Assistant Planner Anna Salvador. And let's just make sure that they are moved over. Perfect. Good evening, Mr. Anderson and Ms. Salvador.
Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Great.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Anna Salvador, Assistant Planner, and also with me this evening is Eric Anderson, a Principal Planner from the Community Development Department. The purpose of this presentation this evening is in regards to the density bonus updates. The proposed changes to City Code are to reflect recent changes in state law. The state requires the city to demonstrate how state density bonus law will be implemented in the city, including application requirements. Density bonus is not a new concept in Mountain View, and the city currently has an ordinance that was established in 2013. Much of the language in this current ordinance is now outdated due to changes in state law. Review of density bonus projects has proven to be a complex process with many overlapping components, primarily in how density bonus interacts with other city rules, including FAR and the BMR program. So with this in mind, the goal of this work is to improve clarity for both applicants and staff about the components of the state law, consider interactions with local requirements, and incorporate what the city requires of applicants in order to review a density bonus request. So density bonus is a state program that is implemented at the local level. It is most applicable to residential projects that are providing affordable units, including units to meet replacement requirements. Depending on the project's scope under density bonus law, projects can be eligible for a density bonus, which is an increase above the maximum density that is otherwise permitted. Incentives and concessions, which deal with relief from cost-constraining development standards, waivers, which are relief from physically constraining development standards, and then also parking reductions, State law includes defined parking ratios that would apply to all proposed residential uses in a qualifying project. There's 6 kind of key components that I'd like to touch on this evening about the proposed ordinance. At this time, staff is proposing a simplified ordinance that is more responsive to any subsequent changes in state law in the coming years. It makes reference to the relevant sections rather than pulling the language directly. The findings also in the ordinance are streamlined to further clarify the city's limited discretion to deny specific requests under density bonus. Additionally, staff is proposing changes that provide more specific detail regarding application requirements, and this just further provides clarity for both applicants and staff as to what is required to review and determine eligibility for a density bonus. The proposed ordinance also clarifies wherein the city FAR is the density metric that will be used to determine base density. Another component of the proposed ordinance is to do with the affordable housing NOFA projects, and the current density bonus ordinance that the city has includes language that would allow the city to consider a density bonus greater than what is allowed under state law. The challenge with this existing language is that there are no guideposts to determine when and how the city would consider a greater density bonus, and so the proposed language would just further clarify that this greater density bonus would be allowed for 100% affordable projects through our NOFA process. This supports cities' flexibility to provide streamlined approvals of affordable housing projects. Additionally, the density bonus does interact with our BMR program. Historically, the city has used BMR standards for the administration of affordable units that have been delivered through density bonus, particularly in how the affordability is guaranteed and the tenant selection process. The proposed ordinance formally incorporates these components for density bonus units. And there's other components of the BMR program that have been incorporated into the ordinance to just further align and integrate these two programs. Some examples include distribution of units, having the affordable units be comparable in appearance to the market rate residential units, and also requiring an affordability term in perpetuity for ownership projects, and for lower income ownership units, incorporating the HOA reserve component of the BMR program. As these represent local standards and not requirements under state law, these standards individually would still be subject to incentive or waiver requests. Overall, though, they provide a greater consistency between the programs. Staff is also proposing to move density bonus to the administrative article of the zoning code, primarily because its structure now includes application requirements and findings. And this type of information is typically housed within the administration section. Staff is also proposing to remove density bonus from table 3644-1, just to further clarify that density bonus does not have its own separate application review process, and other aspects of the project ultimately determine the appropriate review process for that project. As a companion to the ordinance, staff is also developing an administrative guidelines document that will serve as a one-stop shop to reference and better understand provisions of state law and the local ordinance. And it would serve as a living document with both examples and further explanation as the city continues to navigate future projects, if state law is amended, or council provides specific direction that could impact future projects as well. This document would be available for both applicants and staff to reference. Thus, staff is recommending the following recommendation as shown on the screen, and this concludes staff presentation as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Do council members have questions? Councilmember Weaver.
you so much, and I apologize to staff in advance that I didn't see this right away in the staff report earlier and provide you with a question earlier. But is the HOA reserve something that we currently have?
Yes, that's correct. When the BMR the BMR ordinance was updated in 2019, that component was added. And it's specifically for projects that are providing ownership units below 80% AMI or below.
And I was wondering additionally, do we have any mechanism for assisting individuals who are in a development like that where they own the unit and it's on a BMR encumbered basis, to cover them for the costs of their share of construction defects? And my reason for asking, I'm thinking back to a piece of constituent casework where a woman in Palo Alto was lucky enough to gain access to a unit through a similar program, but then the railings of the building had rotted out. And she essentially couldn't afford to stay in her unit because she couldn't pay her share of the repair to the building. And I wonder if we have any mechanism to cover individuals who are in that position.
At this time, the BMR program doesn't include kind of what I would equate to like a maintenance allowance, but it has been another kind of constraining factor similar to HOA reserve that we've heard from others as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Do other council members have questions? All right, seeing none, I will move over to public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. The city clerk will display the timer on the screen and we can set that to 2 minutes if that's okay. Ms. von der Linden, great. Thank you. Oh, and the hand went down. So I think that we lost our public comment on this item. So I'll give that person one more chance. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for deliberation and motion. Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you. I don't see, unless Councilmember Ramirez has something to say, I'm assuming he was going to make the motion, but I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to move staff recommendation.
And we would need the title of the ordinance read.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Introduce an ordinance of the City of Mountain View to repeal in its entirety Division 11 of Article 4 of Chapter 36 of the Mountain View City Code and add Division 8 to Article 16 of Chapter 36 of the Mountain View City Code related to density bonus to be read in title only, further reading waived, and set a second reading for March 9th, 2021. And this is attachment 1 to the council report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and second the motion. The only other thing I want to add is my gratitude to staff for being very patient with me and meeting with me a couple of times to walk through some of the complexities of the recommendation. I think it's a work in progress. I expect that the state will continue to amend various laws, and it will have implications for how we implement this. But I understand the rationale for a number of the recommendations that are being made, and I think it's certainly a lot better than where we were coming from. At least we're becoming compliant with state law. So I'll support the motion.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Abe-Koga, a second by Vice Mayor Ramirez, and Councilmember Lieber. Do you have comments?
Thank you. I also wanted to commend staff for navigating a path that delivers the greatest benefit to our residents. And if it is possible to get some information back about other cities that have a maintenance reserve, I think in the rare cases where that's needed, it could really solve some problems for some individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Showalter.
Yeah, I want to particularly thank them for the guidelines. I think that the guidelines document is very helpful. When I first read the staff report and the ordinance, I was a little perplexed about how you did some of the calculations. But I found the examples in the guidance document very helpful. So I like the idea that it's a living document, and as things change or you find out that there are other examples that could be added to it to make it better, I think that's a great idea. So and also I'm really pleased to see this HOA reserve. It seems like a detail, but I think it's an important one. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do any other council members have comments? All right, so we had a motion and a second, so we will, for the staff recommendation, so we will turn it over to Ms. von der Linden for our roll call vote.
Councilmember Abikova.
Aye.
Councilmember Hicks.
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber.
Aye.
Councilmember Matachek.
Yes.
I heard a yes.
Thank you.
No problem.
Councilmember Showalter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Yes.
Mayor Kamei.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we will move on to item 7, which is new business. Item 7.1 is a legislative program priorities for 2021. We'll begin with a staff presentation from our assistant to the city manager, Christina Gilmore. We can move her over. And I'd also like to acknowledge Nicholas Hargis from Congresswoman Eshu's office and Alex Kobayashi with State Senator Becker's office, who are joining us tonight. And I just got word that we'll also have Zach Ross from Assemblymember Berman's office. He's trying to join as well. So I will let Ms. Gilmore kick things off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. I will share my screen. Let's see. Can I play from start? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen.
Great. There was just a delay there. Okay.
But you might want to maximize it because we see all the row of slides. Do you want to maximize it so it's slide by slide?
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christina Gilmore, Assistant to the City Manager. The purpose of this item this evening is to approve recommendations for the proposed legislative program for program priorities to guide the city's regional, state, and federal legislative advocacy during the 2020-2021 legislative session. The City Council has an annual practice of establishing legislative priorities that provide guidance for the city's advocacy efforts related to regional, state, and federal actions that may have an impact on the city and the city's local control to address community and operational needs. In 2020, the council directed staff to expand the existing legislative advocacy program to focus on regional and state legislative issues, identify key legislative issues and bills, analyze and track priority bills and legislation, and proactively advocate for the city's interests, and provide council with talking points and regular written legislative updates, and finally, maintain regular contact and coordinate meetings with our legislative representatives. For the 2021 legislative program scope, we are recommending to follow the program scope from last year, to carry it over, with the exception of adding back the federal level legislative priorities. We do feel that with the change of the federal administration, there is an importance of funding and legislation related to COVID-19 recovery and other legislative issues at the federal level. And so staff believes that we should broaden our legislative efforts to include federal advocacy again moving forward for this coming year. In addition to tracking state, regional, and federal legislation, we are proposing that we will continue to enhance our tracking and updates in coordination with our elected regional representatives. And then finally, staff is recommending that in order to maximize access to information and opportunities to advocate for legislative outcomes, we are recommending that we retain the services of a legislative advocacy consultant. The legislative advocacy consultant will augment our staff capacity to review and track and advocate for legislation at the regional, state and federal level. They'll provide expertise and also help increase the city's presence during the legislative process. Our proposed legislative program for 2021 includes the general parameters that are currently as part of our council policy A16, which advocates for maintaining local control, ensuring that we have funding for city programs, opposing any unfunded mandates, and fit within our existing policy, practice, and goals. In addition to those council policy areas that are already established, we are recommending that the council adopt the following issue areas, broad issue areas for tracking legislation at the state and federal level. So those would include COVID-19 recovery and relief, race, equity, and inclusion, housing, sustainability, and airplane noise. If there are other specific bills that come to staff or council's awareness throughout the calendar year, staff can be sent specific bills to assess whether or not that legislation will fit within our adopted program priorities. So our recommendation is for the council to approve the proposed legislative program priorities to guide the city's regional, state, and federal legislative advocacy for 2021. Next steps, we will continue with our ongoing legislative tracking and advocacy. We will be providing biweekly updates to the council on the effectiveness of our advocacy and any updates on any bills or those broad issue areas that we identified. We will continue to engage with our state and federal representatives for information sharing and coordinating opportunities for the council to meet with those representatives. For the fiscal year 2021-22 budget proposal, we'll be proposing limited period funding for a legislative advocate, as I spoke about earlier. And then finally, we will have a request for proposals prepared for launch if the council does approve funding in the next fiscal year budget to include, to contract with the legislative advocacy consulting firm. So this concludes staff's presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. So I think since we have some of our representatives from the elected offices, wanted to give them an opportunity for brief remarks if they have any on a legislative update, and then we can go to council questions and then public comment if that works for everyone. Okay, all right, so perhaps we can start with Congresswoman Eshu's office. Nicholas, do you have an update for us?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Congresswoman is humbled and deeply grateful for the trust that you have placed in her to represent you. Among her current priorities are the following. Number one, work with President Biden's administration to beat the virus. Congresswoman Eshu's top priority is to take aggressive action to speed up vaccinations and crush the virus. That's why her first order of business as chairwoman of the Health Subcommittee in the House was to hold a hearing with top experts to get the latest information about the pandemic and hear their best recommendations. I would strongly encourage everyone to go to the Energy and Commerce Committee's website online, which is energycommerce.house.gov, and go to the Health Subcommittee webpage that's on there and watch the hearing because it was incredibly interesting. Representative Eshu is dedicated to working with the administration to pass the American Rescue Plan in support of public health and provide financial relief. The plan includes vaccinating 100 million people in 100 days, funding local governments and schools, aiding small businesses, including through the Paycheck Protection Program, which was extended in the recent COVID relief package in December, providing financial support to struggling families, addressing racial and society inequities exposed and worsened by the pandemic. In the area of housing, Congresswoman Eshu has been a strong supporter of funding for programs like the Community Development Block Grants and the Home Investment Partnership Program to help develop new affordable housing in the Bay Area and protect existing stock. In terms of transportation, Congresswoman Eshu secured $647 million to electrify Caltrain, a project that is ongoing and which will improve air quality and take thousands of cars off of the road. She also voted for legislation to provide $100 billion last year to improve public transportation, and infrastructure remains a top priority for her in the new Congress. When it comes to racial disparities, and as we honor the stories of Black Americans this month, we recognize that communities of color continue to face extraordinary injustices. As Health Subcommittee Chairwoman, Representative Eshu is committed to ensuring an equitable vaccine rollout and addressing healthcare inequities. And that was a major topic of conversation at the hearing last Wednesday. Furthermore, the Congresswoman supports policing reform and reinstating the Voting Rights Act, which was gutted by the Supreme Court. She co-sponsored the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act last summer as well. And finally, when it comes to the climate crisis, Congresswoman Eshu realizes that climate change is one of the most serious issues facing our nation and our planet. That's why, as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, Congresswoman Eshu is doing everything she can to spur Congress to pass ambitious climate legislation to achieve the reduction in greenhouse gases necessary to avoid catastrophic damage to our planet. And most recently, the Congresswoman introduced the Bay Area Restoration Act, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Act, that would provide $50 million every year over 5 years to improve the Bay Area's resilience to rising sea levels. And simultaneously, it would establish a San Francisco Bay program office at the Environmental Protection Agency. If anyone has any questions, please give our office a call at 650-323-2984. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hargis. Really appreciate that update from the federal level. So now we'll move over to the state level, and we could start with Alex Kobayashi from Senator Josh Becker's office. Alex, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Alex Kobayashi from Senator Josh Becker's office. The presentation was great, and we were happy to see some of the issue areas that staff is recommending to add to your portfolio. They really tie into a lot of what Senator Becker wants to work on in his first year in the legislature. He wants to work on excuse me, creating more affordable housing, looking for ways to fund that for the cities. Obviously, that's always the biggest issue. So he's looking at ways to provide funding for local governments to provide the housing. He obviously has a history of working in green energy and sustainability issues. So that's great. We're glad that's on there. And then also working to diversify opportunities for some of our underserved communities and reforming the criminal justice system. So we're glad to see that so much is in line with what staff is proposing for Mountain View for the coming year. And we look forward to working with all of you on that. And that's about it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kobayashi. Appreciate it. So I think now we'll move over to Mr. Zachary Ross with Assembly Member Berman's office. We like the mood lighting.
I know. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it's good to see everybody. I have one crying infant and one crying toddler inside the house. So this is what we get.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. We promise not to take too much time.
No, I appreciate the invitation to be here today. And it's great to see all of your legislative priorities. I think we continue to share a lot of priorities with the city of Mountain View between housing and COVID relief, of course. And I am a proud resident of Mountain View and actually live right next to the community center. And so I'd say the vaccines, seeing everything that's happening with the vaccines right over the fence right there every day, I think is a constant reminder of one of our biggest priorities as well, is how do we get the state to receive and distribute those vaccines in an efficient manner, productively, and get it out to as many people as quickly as possible. We have not, there were a lot of hiccups, I guess you could say, at the very beginning, but I think the state is starting to do much better with getting everything out, and we want to continue to work with the city and continue to work with the counties to make sure that folks are getting vaccinated and that vaccines aren't going to waste, certainly, and that everyone who's eligible has a vaccine that they can be administered. I also, one of our priorities, Assemblymember Berman continues to be the chair of the Elections and Redistricting Committee in the Assembly, and so voting and access to voting continues to be a huge priority of his. We have a bill this year to make permanent some of our previous bills, including the Track My Ballot bill, which we had a couple years ago, and the sort of universal vote by mail, making sure every active California voter gets a ballot in the mail. And so we have bills to make both of those permanent. We also have other transparency-related elections bills, and we're working on a few housing bills as well. I know housing in our area continues to be a huge issue, and we need to figure out a way to make it easier for folks to build housing, and when there are communities that are doing a really good job on housing, to figure out how to support them. Figure out how to create increased funds and make it easier for cities to allow housing and to sort of incentivize housing from the state level. The last thing I'll just say is one of our big priorities, certainly one of sort of what's taken over my job, is improving the EDD, improving access to unemployment insurance for folks in our communities who are really, really struggling. And we're almost 12 months into this, and the EDD seems to be only getting worse. And we need to figure out a way to support folks. And we work every single day with people in Mountain View, with people across our district, to try and help them access those benefits. And so that's a priority of certainly of our local office, and definitely of Assemblymember Berman, is how do we help these people in the best way possible, given the horrible circumstances. But we look forward to continuing to work with you. We're always available. If anyone ever has any questions, they're always welcome to reach out to us. And it's good. We've been working very closely with Senator Becker. We're very excited about his election, and he made good staffing decisions. So if you have any hard questions, reach out to Alex Kobayashi with Senator Becker's office, and he'd be more than happy to help. So thank you very much for inviting me. Sorry about the lighting, and I look forward to working with you all moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Ross. We appreciate it. It's so wonderful to hear from not only our city staff, but to hear from all of our legislative offices on the federal and state level as we discuss these really important topics that affect our residents' everyday lives. So I'll move on to council questions, and I see Vice Mayor Ramirez with his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. And echoing what you just said, I appreciate the representatives from each of the legislative offices for providing these updates. A quick question for staff. I don't want to open Pandora's box, but is this an appropriate time to bring up specific legislative proposals, or do you just want high-level direction from the council? What would be most helpful?
We would appreciate receiving high-level direction, and if there are specific bills or legislation that you would like staff to track, if you could send that information to staff after the council meeting, and then that way we can review it and provide analysis and assist the council with analysis of each of the bills.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Matichak.
Yeah. I just have one question, and that is whether or not if we hire an advocacy organization, would they also have the ability to help us craft things we would like to see, such as changes to SB 330? You know, we saw quite a few potential problems with that, and rather than wait to have those addressed, maybe we could be more proactive. Would they be able to do that as well?
So that certainly is our intent on exploring bringing on an advocacy firm, is to help us not only engage in a more meaningful level at the region, at the state and federal level, but also to be able to advocate and possibly influence legislation. So we can certainly include that in our request for proposals when we develop it, and that can be a point of conversation with any of the proposers who respond to our RFP and moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you, and thank you all of our reps from our legislative offices for joining us this evening. My question is regarding, again, I guess similar to Councilmember Matichak's interest. How much support can we as council members receive from I guess the consultant in terms of regional issues, and what I noticed that I think was missing on the list, and that I might try to add, is transportation. But in light of for the recent discussions at BTA about Measure B funds, my hope was that we could get some assistance in keeping track of these issues, and then getting some help in us getting help to advocate for our city on issues like transportation funding. Is that doable with the consultant?
Yeah, so our proposed scope is to be focusing on the state and federal level for the legislative advocacy, but staff can certainly take that feedback and review what opportunities there might be to include regional scoping in that. We also have staff that is also within our various departments who also track regional priorities and issues. So if we're understanding correctly that transportation or some other issue areas are of interest to the council, then staff can sit down and talk about what are some areas of opportunity for us to be a little bit more proactive and to engage with any of those regional entities.
That would be great. In particular, I guess I'm sorry if I'm going into comments. I think this is an opportunity where there might be some resources coming down from different levels, and I just want to position us to be able to take those opportunities when they come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lieber.
Thank you. And a question to staff. If I'm understanding the staff report correctly, we're more identifying priorities tonight, and then an RFP being formed and going out would be dependent on budget action. So we would have the ability to look at the cost of having lobbying done for us in the context of the full budget.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Do any other council members have any questions? All right, seeing none, would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. The city clerk will display the timer on the screen, and I think we'll just stick with 2 minutes if that's okay, Ms. von der Linden. Great, all right. So I see your hand, Bruce England. Please unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi. Okay. Bruce England for Mountain View Coalition for Sustainable Planning and Green Spaces Mountain View. I'm not sure what the best way is to go about this. I have a number of bills citations that I could forward, but I don't want to just list them off here, and I didn't manage to pull off a letter. So I'll just tell you some of the topics, and then we can go from there. I can, contact the city and figure out the rest of it. But any kind of bills that have to do with active transportation in Mountain View, support for that, and programs related to walking and biking in our city would be great. And anything related to environmental sustainability, I saw in the report that still needs to be fleshed out, and I assume that Steve Adinger and other people on staff are working with him on that, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But our Green Spaces group is very interested in seeing any kind of support for developing more green spaces in our city. And that can be anything: tree canopy, park space, those sorts of things. And then there are a couple of bills of interest related to walking and biking in Mountain View. And one of them is AB 122, and that's where bikes can treat stop signs as yield signs. This has been done in some of our neighboring states, like I believe Oregon, Washington, Idaho. It's sometimes called the Idaho law, something like that. So that'd be a great interest. And the other one is AB 117, which is an electric bike purchase incentive. I'd like to see incentives for more than just electric bikes, but this would be a great way to get people out of their cars and riding alternative forms of transportation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Alexander Brown.
Hey, yeah, it's a lobbyist. Just call it a lobbyist. I don't think we need a lobbyist, especially if we're going to be facing a budget shortfall. I'd much rather see a focus on solving problems locally and working with our neighbor cities than fixating on so much on the state or federal legislation. We've heard tonight that we already have advocates who represent the people of Mountain View in the other legislative bodies. And Bruce, I'd be glad to call and advocate to them with you directly. Seems to me like the attention paid to the state Senate and Assembly's actions by the council historically have been much more of a distraction than an asset. But also, what's the ROI on this? Couldn't we instead hire more people locally to ease the burden of our existing staff? All right, thanks. I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. Tim McKenzie, please unmute.
Hi, thanks for letting me unmute. Yeah, I'm Tim McKenzie. I use he, him pronouns. I've been a resident of the Montaloma neighborhood since 2015. I'll second what Alex just said. I'd like to echo that point. We don't need a lobbyist. And just sort of on a broad sort of priorities level, something that I'd like to see more of from Mountain View is us sort of taking the lead on initiatives and not looking to our neighbor cities and seeing what are they doing, what's the least we can get away with. But when we look to our neighbor cities, finding best practices that we can adopt and become the best version of Mountain View that we can be, and we will be the best city in the area and everyone will be racing to catch up. I think that is how we should be looking at things. We should be doing everything we can at the local level to be the best version that we can be. And then that can serve as a model, you know, the traditional American ideal of the shining city on the hill that everyone else can model themselves after. Mountain View could be that. And I hope that that is the direction that council chooses to take, that will look for what we can do and use that to be leaders, and then be able to coordinate with our neighboring cities to help bring them along with us. And then when other people have taken the lead, we follow in their footsteps and maybe even take it a step further. I hope that we can do that moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see any more hands raised, and I don't see anyone else on the line. So I'd like to turn it back to council for deliberation and action. Does anyone have any? Yes, Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. I support staff recommendation. Definitely, I think this is an opportunity to add the federal level advocacy. With the new administration, I think we have I'm looking forward to many opportunities to get some things done. So I definitely would add that. In particular, and I don't know if Mr. Hargis is around, but I know it's one of our goals. I believe it's in one of our goals or our work plan for our goals. But the Shenandoah properties, my hope is that perhaps with the new administration, there might be some movement there. So I'm hoping we can revisit that topic. And then I did want to see if there would be support to add transportation into as one of our priority areas. As mentioned, we've been discussing a lot going on with just BTA and Measure B, but I think there's anticipation that there'll be some infrastructure bills, even at the federal and state level. So I would like for us to be involved in those discussions. I appreciate this coming in terms of having a I guess we'll say consultant. I believe Councilmember Matichak and I have been advocated for more help, more resources in this area for several years now. Ideally, I think we did talk about having a staff person, but in light of the other issues that we're dealing with, my interest is to have someone as soon as we can. And if this is the way to do that, then I support it. So yes, so I would hoping that we can add transportation to the list. Otherwise, I am very supportive of this recommendation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I see that Mr. Hargis is back with us. So I'm sure that you heard the comment then from Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Yes, ma'am. And I am not a legislative staffer, so I can't comment on this particular initiative, but we would be happy to follow up with you, Councilmember Abe-Koga, and make sure that you have the information that you need.
Great, thank you. All right, Councilmember Matichak.
Thank you. So we have been talking about this for quite some time, and I'm happy to see it come to us. But I seem to recall our conversation about us being the best advocates and not somebody who isn't us being an advocate on our behalf. So I'm very interested in having someone keep tabs on things and analyze those and summarize them and give us heads up and prepare us. But I personally think we need to be the ones, if there are conversations to be had or phone calls to be made or Zoom meetings, to be the ones that are participating, because I think, when it comes from us, it carries more weight. And also, we're more familiar with a lot of the nuances that an advocate might not be aware of. And so I want to make sure we're very much involved in this and they're not advocating on our behalf without us being there. I also have quite a few topics that I would also like to focus on or have tracked. And probably the biggest one is having been on the airplane noise roundtable for a while, the impact of airplane noise on people's health. So there were some bills introduced in the last session, but they didn't go anywhere. But there were, gosh, I think there were up to 17 or 18 relevant bills last time. So I feel like if we all keep on adding these, we're going to have so many. So I'm not sure how we're going to figure out a priority, but I'm thinking maybe we need to do that because there could be a lot that we're interested in. I'm also interested in things that help when it comes to COVID, small landlords. I now have had a couple come to me and ask about our loan program, and unfortunately we don't have that anymore. We moved the money to help renters. And so I think there's other things, we ought to keep our eye on. And I also am very interested in being proactive about addressing bills that have already been passed. It's now legislation that we know have issues. And the one that I mentioned earlier, the SB 330, when we talked about that as a council, we had lots of concerns about it and said, we don't want to just wait until they do something about it. Let's proactively say what we want done and work with our representatives to try to make those changes. So, see, I will send the topics, the list of bills that I'm aware of, or previous ones that might come back. But again, I think we need to figure out some way to prioritize those, or we might overwhelm the consulting firm. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Malachek. So I believe Councilmember Alde-Koga moved the staff recommendation plus adding transportation. Is that right? And so we're looking for a second. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm happy to move it. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was double checking. Because I realized we got right into comments, and then so I just want to see if there was a second. Councilmember Lieber, I think I saw you. Your second. Feel free to add your comments. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm so glad to see the scope of the topics that we're going to potentially consider pieces of legislation within. And I think it's really a breath of fresh air, and it's going to make us more effective to not just be on the same topics that, council had been for many years. And I know this is a couple of years coming, so my hat's off to everyone who's been on council to move that change along. And I think that as we get closer and deeper into the budget process, we're going to have a better idea of maybe how many hours of assistance we could afford, because lobbyist help is very expensive. And I have to agree very much with Councilmember Malachek when she said that, we can be the most effective advocates for ourselves with that help in tracking bills. And I think the community is going to have some great ideas in terms of bills and in terms of where the implementation is going wrong. Because as Councilmember pointed out, oftentimes it's the unintended consequences of the implementation that can be problematic for our city to deal with. So I'm very pleased to see this item move forward and to support it. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Showalter.
Well, I'm pleased to see it move forward too. I think this is very important, and I know when I was on council the first few years, we were able to do quite a bit of lobbying, and I think it was really effective. For instance, the Shenandoah Park that you're talking about, that we got that some work with that started, and we'd like to get back on track with that. It was a very important project. One thing I wanted to bring up, though, was the legislative priorities list. The statement protects or increases local control or revenue. That is a very broad blanket statement, and it makes me very uncomfortable, because over time, local control has been used as a buzzword for people to hide behind who don't want to do their part in housing or don't want to do environmental regulations. And we're not that community. We've been very good actors in terms of creating more housing and being good stewards of our environment and the regional environment. So I think that we don't want to protect or increase blanket local control. We want to be very judicious with that. And if there's local control, I mean, for instance, with housing bills, I'm interested in housing bills that support people who do good housing and perhaps penalize people who don't. And I know one of the things I've heard again and again is how we want our neighbors to step forward. So I feel uncomfortable with this blanket local control statement. And I think we need to be judicious about it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hicks.
That's definitely a longer, more nuanced, I agree, and that's a long discussion probably. But I was going to say I agree in general with the direction that council is taking on this, and also with Councilmember Matichak and Lieber's suggestion that we can advocate for ourselves. And that we need, although I like the general direction we're going in, I want to be careful with how this fits into the budget. But that I think is a later discussion. And then lastly, I just wanted to raise, as we're raising different, and I would agree with adding transportation, and I'm interested in the Shenandoah property. I agree with Councilmember Abekoga about that. I also wanted to say that I've been I work with a group called Transportation Choices for Sustainable Communities. I did a webinar with them, and what came out of that was some legislation that we've been talking to Assemblymember Becker about, and it's modifying the Complete Streets legislation to add green streets elements. That would be things like different types of planting to mitigate climate change, water pollutant filtration, sea level rise, stormwater control, urban heat islands, biodiversity corridors, and encouraging walking and biking, as well as linear parks and streets for road diets and streets for legislation. So kind of an overhaul of the Complete Streets legislation to turn it into sustainable streets legislation. And that's something I'd like us to follow and support as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Hicks. So I see Councilmember Abekoga and Councilmember Matichak with their hands up. So I'm going to just put in my 2 cents before we go into second round. So my comments in general are that I will approve I'm in support of the staff recommendation and the motion. I think that perhaps I might think of things a little bit differently though in my support, which is to me, it's about increasing our capacity to keep up with the various legislation that's happening, both on the federal level and in the state level. So when I think about any type of IRP, I perhaps think of it as having more capacity to triage the amount of bills that are being written every day, and where our city priorities are, and being able to align them. And so I think particularly, I think there needs to be a balance as well. I'm happy to advocate and support and lobby, but I think some of us also have full-time jobs. And so it's a full-time job being able to track all this legislation that's coming, and being able to keep up on the different button amend things that can happen. So I think I'm just looking for a bit of help. And I think we've tried to explore in prior years staff capacity to do this. Now we're facing a pandemic. So I think it's more to give a little bit of kind of breathing room for the importance of these legislative priorities. And that's why I'm supporting it, not so much, to kind of, I think, to the other comments that have been made. And I know that we'll be able to talk about this more throughout the budgeting process and really refine the scope. But I think for the high level, I'm in support of this direction. So, Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you. I wanted to respond to some others, and also I am in agreement. It wasn't about giving it to someone to advocate for us, but I've been in situations, especially at the Cities Association, chairing the Legislative Action Committee, where we went through all the housing bills 2 years ago, and other cities have their binder and they have positions on every bill, and we just never had that. And so I was pretty much kind of on my own trying to figure out what would be best for our city. So that's what I'm really looking for, is that kind of backup support, so we can take positions publicly on some of these issues, and then yes, to supplement if we can't get out there, to have a backup person to do that, to advocate for us. But I wanted to circle back and kind of tie that to Councilmember Showalter's comments about local control, and I very much agree with what was said. What I experienced when I was working on these housing bills was that I think we at Mountain View is a little different from some of our neighboring cities, except with like the housing bills. And but what I struggled with was that because I didn't have the support or backup, I couldn't carve a path for us that would be delineating from some of the other cities that would want full local control, no on these housing bills. As I was trying to find ways to get to yes, I didn't want to say no on everything. It was challenging because I just didn't have that support, backup support, to figure out what our path would be. So that's my interest here. And so I'm okay with saying local control, but I want Mountain View to figure out what that means for Mountain View, and that's what I would look for help on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Matichak.
So I'm a little bit, uncertain about what process we're going to use here to say what we want to track. So I agree with the topics that were in the staff recommendation, and I certainly agree transportation, which is part of the motion, is important. But I feel like there's all these others. So are we supposed to put them all forward tonight to get them into the motion, or are we? So it feels weird to me to put one in and not others that I think are equally important. So I guess I'd like to understand how we're going to go forward with this.
Great. So I will turn to City Manager McCarthy on this one to help clarify the process.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Matichak. So no, tonight is not intended to go through the litany of items. So what we would ask is for, if you are interested in a bill, we would ask that you send that to staff. So you can send it to Christina, you can copy me on that. And essentially we need to find out what the details of the bill are, because sometimes the bills look a certain way and then we find details about them and they may not actually align with council priorities, or it may not necessarily be a staff recommendation. So I think what we need to do is just find out what all of the bills are, and then certainly if you're interested in an advocacy firm, they can help with that as well. However, timing will be an issue with that, because if that's not going to be until part of this budget process, then that won't be approved until June. So I would just note that. So essentially what we're going to do is compile the list, analyze the legislation, and then we'll get that all into one document. And then the goal is to be updating council pretty regularly, at least monthly, if not at least twice a month, depending on workload, so you all know what's happening and where things are at. So essentially you would need to give that information to staff, and then we'll go from there. And And I think for the items that don't necessarily fall neatly under the priorities, for instance, you mentioned COVID or other things that we know could fall under the umbrella of council priorities. I think if council members are interested in certain items, go ahead and send them, and staff will analyze them and have that assessment and then be able to give the recommendation about it.
So do we add to the motion to say that we should all send additional topics or specific bills that we're aware of? Because I don't want them to get lost and have us go back to, well, the motion was what's in the staff report plus transportation. So can I add a friendly amendment to say, and we'll also look at other topics for consideration that have been raised here tonight or that we'll send in? So I guess I'm asking the maker of the motion.
Yes, I'm fine with that. If is that what staff is intending?
City Manager McCarthy, did you hear that question?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Abakoga. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I don't know if anybody seconded it, but I'll second it then, if nobody has.
Councilmember Lieber had seconded it.
Ah, okay, thanks.
Okay, great. And she has her hand up conveniently, so we can move on to Councilmember Lieber.
And I'm very good with that friendly amendment, and it really helps to hear some of the comments from council that we've heard. And I think this is a very exciting base to be able to work from. I wanted to do one thing while we still have the legislative staff here, which is to really thank them for all the constituent casework they've been doing during this period. I know that they have been absolutely flooded, and I worked with Leslie Bulbuck from Assemblymember Berman's office on an EDD case, which was for a resident of Mountain View who had been having trouble all year long trying to get money and was really having a hard time because of it. And they were able to help in resolving the case and get the money into the bank account within 3 days. And that's really the proof in the pudding, is when the money comes into the bank account. So thank you to each one of the legislative staff who are here working tonight, and the work that you do every day. I know it's not easy.
Thank you, Councilmember Lieber. Councilmember Showalter.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the judicious evaluation of local control that two of us have mentioned it, and I hope that there's more support for that, because I really do think we want to look at every instance as whether it's local control that Mountain View is interested in, not that just blanket local control. That's very important to me. So I'd like to add that. Is that okay? Yeah, good. Thank you.
It looks like you have thumbs up from both motion makers. So seeing no more hands from council members, I think it'll be all right to move on to a roll call vote, if that's all right with my colleagues. All right, seeing some heads nodding, I'll turn it over to Ms. Vonderlinden. Thank you.
Councilmember Abakoga.
Aye.
Councilmember Hicks.
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber.
Aye.
Councilmember Matichak.
Yes.
Councilmember Showalter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Yes.
Mayor Kamei.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you. Yes, and once again, thank you to our guests who joined us and gave us an update on the legislation. All right, so now we'll move on to item 7.2, our fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget status report. Recommended mid-year adjustments, fiscal year 2021-22 preliminary general operating fund forecast, and fiscal year 2020-21 performance workload measures. So to begin, City Manager Kimber McCarthy will start things off, and then we'll move on to Finance and Administrative Services Director Jesse Takahashi.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So tonight is our mid-year update that we're bringing forward to inform council of our status of our current budget and let you know about where we're going to be, at least projected right now for next fiscal year. So I think you all know one of the things we've all been talking about so much is just the great deal of uncertainty that we're in right now, not only with how things are right now with COVID, but how things are going to go. So I would just say that the information we have tonight is only as good as what we know right now. So a lot of this could change over the next several months. It could change either way. And I think that that's really part of the top line information that you're going to get from Mr. Takahashi tonight. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to him to give you the details, and then certainly we'll answer questions when it comes time to that.
Okay, Mr. Takahashi, are you taking over? You might be on mute if you are speaking. Yep, you're on mute. I'm gonna click the ask to unmute button. Do you see that?
Okay, apologize. Technical difficulties getting unmuted. Let's see, have I shared my screen and can you see that now?
We see you and we hear you.
Okay, excellent. And you should see the title slide?
Yes.
Very good. In that case, good evening, Mayor Kamei and honorable council members. I'm Jesse Takahashi, Finance Administrative Services Director. Before we get into the mid-year, I just want to kind of bring you up to speed with a little bit of background as to where we actually, how we got here and up to today. Most recently, on November the 10th, the budget update was brought to council, and at that time appeared to be on track with overall revenues and expenditures. However, I would point out that so much has happened since November 10th at our last update, and the level of uncertainty and the continued impacts to the economy have really been unprecedented in that things have happened so quickly and often without a lot of notice. And the result of this is that it's been keeping us on shaky ground where you know, we still don't know, and as much as we would like to know, where things are going to play out. Since November, we found out that, you know, the COVID test positive cases have increased significantly. We've gone back to sheltering in place with limited activities. While there is vaccines now that are out, they have been found to be being a lot slower to roll out than expected. We've had introduced the concept of new variants that have been increasing and making things more complicated. We've experienced an attack back in January on the U.S. Capitol, which created a lot of new issues. And we have also transitioned to a new federal administration, which is continuing to transition. So all in all, over the last few months, the probability of our particular situation of worsening has, in our estimation, increased, meaning that while the numbers that we're going to get into and see are our best estimates, that there is a very good likelihood that while they could get better and be better than what we thought, there's also a big higher probability that they may also worsen. So I just want to kind of set that stage for the rest of the discussion. And as we move into our next slides, this is a summary of our revenues for the general operating fund. And we actually show our prior year audited, what we adopted, and estimated. So reading the chart from left to right, the blue, green, and purple, adopted, audited, adopted and estimated, the purple colors. Overall revenues for the general operating fund are estimated to be $140.5 million. Slightly lower than budget overall, but I wanted to focus in on a few of the components, and these are essentially the revenues broken down into the major categories. Property taxes, which are by far the largest single revenue source for the city, is actually doing well overall and has been historically a very stable revenue source. As you can see, the estimated amounts for the current year, which is about $58 million, is better than the adopted budget. And this bodes well for the city as the foundation of the general fund revenues. Our second largest source, and one that I'd wanted to highlight, is use of money and property, which essentially consists of rents and leases, which is rather unique to the city of Mountain View, as I think we have mentioned in the past. The fact that we actually have ground leases and lease out to various companies and businesses throughout the city has also been a source of stable revenues over the years, and during this time especially is continuing to act as a source. You'll notice that there is a slight decrease here, and that's because our investment income is also included in this category, and there's been a slight decrease in earnings on that. But overall, this continues to be a stable source of the city's general operating fund revenues. Where we've seen the most impacts because of COVID are in our next sources, which are the sales tax and TOT, our transit occupancy tax. And while these are expected to continue to underperform because of the shelter in place that's been on and off again during this past year, as well as the impacts on travel and really limited use of hotels. These numbers are going down and are expected to underperform not only this year, but into the near future. Moving on to our general operating fund expenditures, you'll note that by far the largest category of expenditures is in our salaries and benefits. Personnel costs essentially provide services, and that is represented here in the personnel area. As you can see, we are expected to realize some budgetary savings. Out of the $108 million or so that we're expecting to project in, there's a lot of vacant positions. We've had a lot of personnel turnovers as well, and those vacancies and empty positions have helped keep the expenditures down somewhat to a large degree. In services and supplies, those are essentially on track with budget, and really those are the significant pieces of what we have here. It's really a lot of the vacancies and salary savings that are helping to keep expenditures in check. This slide puts the two together, the revenues and the expenditures. So at this point in time, you could see that we are expecting a deficit of $1.5 million. And so that compares to the adopted budget, which was essentially a break-even amount. So it has deteriorated. And while that is concerning, it does represent about 1% or so of the overall expenditures. And so at this time, as I had mentioned at the outset, it's really difficult to know where this is going to end up at the end of the fiscal year because of all of the uncertainty. While this could improve, there's certainly a lot of risk that this could also deteriorate further. And so at this point in time, we're recommending that the city proceed cautiously with the remaining part of the year, continue to monitor expenditures, and try to do its best to deal with the pandemic. So this next slide summarizes some of the other major funds that we have in the city. We have Development Services Fund, which is composed of essentially a building and planning areas. And these are, while within the general fund, are a segregated separate fund to monitor the activity of those services. We have the Shoreline Golf Links, which also includes not only the golf course, but also Michael's Shoreline Restaurant. And then also the Shoreline Regional Park Community, which is consists of essentially the area in the North Bay Shore. So to summarize, the revenues are for the development services are running slightly below budget. However, these are also offset with below budget expenditures. And so those are roughly offsetting each other, and development services in general are still continuing to stay very busy. And while the numbers are down a bit, we do expect they are going to net out and still remain positive for the rest of the fiscal year. The Shoreline Golf Links are running below budget revenues, primarily because of the restaurant. But the golf is doing quite well with the popularity. And so again, it is expected, net overall will be expected to have a net positive, but it now is running below budget for expenditures. And then the Shoreline Community Park revenues are on track, and principally because most of the revenues there are from property taxes, which, as I had mentioned, are continuing to be stable and fairly strong even through this pandemic, with expenditures running slightly below budget. Our utility funds, water, wastewater, and solid waste or garbage, those are also essentially on track or below budget in terms of the expenditures. The wastewater, there is a slight under budget for revenues, but something or nothing that is causing considerable concern at this point in time. And then our solid waste is also on track as well. So the utility funds are projected to remain in good shape for the rest of this fiscal year. We do have a number of mid-year adjustments that we are recommending at this time, and a lot of them are related to the COVID-19 costs that we've incurred. And there's several, $500,000 is being requested for expenditures that have been made throughout this fiscal year, continuing from last fiscal year in terms of PPE provisions, providing hygiene stations throughout the community, and various overtime related to COVID mitigation efforts. There's also technology-related expenditures that have been incurred for staff, setting up new Zoom licenses, deploying laptops in order to allow people to work at home, and other related expenditures as a result of trying to address these issues with COVID. And then $150,000 is being requested for work from home mitigation. We have over 300 employees that are continuing to work from home, and these are related to costs necessary to help with making that situation better for them, as this situation has continued to be a long-term endeavor, not just a short-term. So these funds are also needed for that purpose. Next is $1.4 million for reimbursements for fire strike team deployments. The city fire department has been requested, or was requested, to go out on over 6 mutual aid requests. A lot of overtime was incurred, and so these represent the reimbursements that we expect to come in related to all of those deployments. And then we have a small amount in the utility fund, water fund, for additional processing costs. And then lastly, in finance and administrative services, we have $400,000 that is being requested in anticipation of a couple of key positions that are going to be retiring at the end of the calendar year. Positions that may in some cases be difficult to fill, and where over 56 years of combined experience and institutional knowledge will be leaving us around the same time. And we feel it's imperative that there's sufficient training and transfer of knowledge to occur with these before these folks go. And so that is why this request is being made. Now I wanted to turn attention briefly to the preliminary forecast for next fiscal year, fiscal 22. Our projections at this point in time indicate that we will experience another deficit of 1.4 million, which is comparable to where the current mid-year estimate is. And again, the revenues and expenditures, while we have done our best to make this forecast, are based on a lot of uncertainty that continues to occur, and it is a challenge, continues to be a challenge to really pin these down. So would just note that these are a snapshot in time. Several months from now, these certainly could be off in either direction, but this is based on the best that we can do at this point. Some of the assumptions that went into this, into the forecast, I wanted to just list out here. So the property tax base, which was our largest general fund revenue, is increasing by only a little bit over 1% versus the normal 2%. That is more typical in a normal year. Part of that is we also expect appeals to increase because of the turnover in the commercial area and the fact that the work from home may affect the values of certain commercial properties. And so that will be lower than what we have experienced historically. We do anticipate, or we have built in, the expectation that shelter in place will continue in some form throughout the summer, and economic activity will only slowly increase as COVID gets under control and is able to be managed. Vaccinations will continue, we believe, into the fall, even though they have started, but the expectation is that it will still take some time before that can get rolled out fully to the point where the economy will be able to open up more fully. We continue to see sales tax and transit and occupancy tax recovering, and as I had mentioned, that is something that is going to be slow to recover and will likely roll into most of next year as well. And then there's still other revenues that will be impacted by COVID, facility rentals, charges for services, for example, the Center for Performing Arts, whether we can book in, events inside, that remains to be seen. And so we're taking a conservative approach on how much we can assume we will be collecting for those kinds of events. And so that's kind of where we are at this point with our quick look ahead into the following fiscal year. So at this point, we are continuing to evaluate budget requests. Departments and the city manager and the budget review team will be meeting in March to discuss and to consider the requests. We'll be having capital improvement study sessions in March we will be incorporating and having our Community Budget 101 workshop towards the end of March, which we're continuing to work on and finalize. And then as we get into April, we'll do another budget check-in and update for council to show what may have changed since tonight. We'll be having hearings on CDBG and home consideration of action plan, as well as funding recommendations. In May, we'll have a second study session on the CIP. And then as we get into June, we will be bringing the recommended budget, formerly the proposed budget, along with public hearings for utility rates, and finally, hopefully, the adoption of the budget and the CIP. That is the roadmap for the next several months, and that will end the presentation. We have several recommendations, which I will leave up here, but that generally will conclude the presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Takahashi. So first, we'll start with the council questions, and then we can move to public comment and then come back for the deliberation on the staff recommendations that you've listed here. So I think first up, we have Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. My question, and maybe it's a little early, but I haven't seen a deficit in a long time, but of course that is extremely concerning to me. And so I was wondering, is intent that for us to, in order to close the deficit, are we looking at cuts, or do you have other options for how we might close that deficit?
Thank you, Councilmember Abe-Koga. So, excuse me, I think I might be losing my voice. So at this point, we are not recommending service level impacts or reductions. As mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty, and we want to bring back the April budget update to council, and hopefully we'll have more information at that time. There's a lot of things that could also change between now and the end of the fiscal year, just in terms of controlling expenditures and looking at some other parts of the budget that we may be able to bring in line to be balanced. We also do have reserves that we haven't needed to use in, like you said, maybe many years. So we don't think that this is a situation like we've had in the past, in the sense that we would be thrown out of whack for a long time. It's just the uncertainty of COVID, and then once the shelter in place changes, it will likely change how a lot of revenues are impacted. So I guess high level takeaway, a lot of uncertainty still, and we hope to have more information in April.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Showalter.
Yeah, I wanted to hear a little bit more about the Community Budgeting 101 workshop. You're muted.
Sorry. Yes, I guess I'm having problems with mute tonight. So yes, Council Member Showalter. So the Community Budget 101 workshop was something that came out of the Race, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee. And one of the things that we really want to try and do is present the community with really an overview of how the budget works, first of all, so that people understand just the nuances of it. Because if you're not really in it, it's really hard to understand how it even works. So we want to at least give a good overview of revenues and expenditures, and our primary revenues, primary expenditures, how it all works, how the process works. And then what we're really wanting to do is also figure out how we might be able to engage the community in an exercise in which they are actually putting together a budget themselves, so they understand how the trade-offs work and how budgeting actually works. We're still trying to figure out how that might work virtually, just because in many instances that I've had the ability to do this sort of exercise. It's a lot easier to do in person when you're in groups. So we're still trying to figure out what some of those details might be, but certainly also give the chance for people to ask questions, provide feedback, and really just give a general chance for the community to just learn more about the budget.
And is this going to be on a Saturday or an evening, or I didn't notice?
I'm looking at the calendar. It looks like it might be a Monday or Tuesday, but I don't think we've nailed down the date yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that was really, I'm sorry, that was meant to be a general time frame. So the exact date, yes, certainly if that's where council would prefer or have some input on that, then we certainly could make that change.
It might be easier for people to participate if it's a Saturday.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Lieber.
Yes, thank you. In terms of getting the budget information and engagement out there, will the slides that you used tonight be generally available, or say sort of a one-page budget document? Because I know that there are boards and commissions and also all the great community organizations are putting together a wish list of items, all of which cost something for this year. And so what's the best way that we can create a realistic picture for them, and maybe also guide them in the way of like, let us know what you'd like to have go away. If, you know, can you think of a better way for us to make some savings or restrict some of the spend a little bit in a way that might be positive?
So Councilmember Lieber, I think I'll need to discuss that with staff and think about that more, how that process could work. As I mentioned to earlier, at this point, I don't think we are thinking about major service level impacts, but obviously we'll know more as time goes on. So I would encourage folks, I do know that we have certain funding opportunities through the CDBG process, which I think was on the next steps outline, where certain community groups may request funding through that process that council has already identified. Then in terms of specific requests, I think obviously council members would hear from community groups. So I think we would need to talk further about how that might work if we do get to that point. But I don't have any specific feedback on how that may work tonight.
Okay.
And I would just add that, again, because things are changing so quickly, that, you know, the numbers that we saw tonight may change very significantly by the time we get closer to, you know, the ability to adopt budgets. So it's really kind of a work in process. We have to monitor as we go and be able to make, you know, changes and decisions, not on the fly, but certainly what we think tonight may change next month based on some new information. One thing I didn't mention that was, well, along with the presidential transition, you know, there's currently a bill in process to provide additional stimulus and assistance to state and local governments. At this point, we have no idea whether that's going to pass at all or in some form. So, you know, these are things that we will find out over hopefully the next month or two, and that can make a big difference in terms of what we can do.
Great, thank you. Do any other council members have questions? All right, so would any member of the public on the line like to provide public comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone, and the city clerk will display the timer on the screen for 2 minutes. Okay, all right. So our first speaker, Tim McKenzie, please unmute.
Hi, councilors. Thanks for giving me time to speak. I just, on the topic of the budget, 5 out of 7 of you were here last June when we commented till about 3 in the morning or so, specifically about the budget, and there was a huge upswell of support from the community to reallocate resources from the police department to other places to better match the services of our community to the needs of our community. The police, we asked them to do far too much. They're a catch-all for every emergency call that comes in. And we were told at the time, the budget is a months-long process. We can't edit it this late. So I'm really encouraged to see this community outreach budgeting 101 topic. And I'll remind you and reiterate that since last June, I have been commenting at council almost monthly, it feels like, at least, sometimes more frequently, sometimes a little bit less, specifically about the topic of the budget and vis-a-vis the police. And I'd like to, once again, highlight that, reiterate that. And I know that the Public Safety Advisory Board has been created, but the appointment process will be such that it will be impossible for them to do their work in time for budgeting this year. So I hope that council will take some action. We already have some information from the HRC listening sessions last year, and a specific policy that I want to flag and put out there for you is elimination of the SRO program, getting cops out of schools. Police in schools are a major contributor of the school to prison pipeline. Basically, they're taking on the role of mental health professionals, which they are not trained to do. And over 800 high school students in Mountain View have signed a petition asking for SROs to be removed. So I'll ask that you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander Brown, please unmute. There you go.
Okay, now?
Yes, now.
As a member of several community groups, I really appreciate Councilmember Lieber's question. I personally would love to have earlier access to details and much more transparency when it comes to the full city budget and the budgeting process. I will show up, no matter what night of the week it is, to the Budget 101 thing. Councilmember Cheryl knows I'll make time. Yeah. The budget is the crystallized priorities of the city. It is what we care about. It's what we are doing. It's not just what we say, it's how we make a difference. And I think that we, as a people, need to know where our priorities lie and what we intend to do, and also need to have a say in it directly, not just, to vote for people and then hope that they do the right thing later on. Thanks.
Thank you. So I don't see any other hands for public comment, and I don't see anyone on the line, so I'm ready to bring it back to council. I see Vice Mayor Ramirez. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think this was pretty clear to members of the public, but just in case, the recommendations pertain to the current budget, not for the budget for the next fiscal year. So I think there will be plenty of opportunity for public comment on the development of that budget. I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation, including adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mountain View authorizing the city manager or designee to amend the classification and salary plan for regular employees for fiscal year 2020 to 21 to be read in title only, further reading waived. And the only addition I would like to make, and of course, I'm welcome to hear recommendations from my colleagues, but the performance measures have long been of interest to me. I don't think this is something that is urgent, but I do think it's important for us to provide some direction, because I don't think a lot of them are terribly valuable. And I think the best way to do this would be to add it to a CPPC, to the CPPC work plan as a non-urgent item. If we can review them before the adoption of the budget for implementation in the next fiscal year, great. But I'm not expecting that will be the case. I know staff has a lot going on. But I do think starting with the CPPC as an opportunity just to provide some maybe high-level direction on performance metrics that would be useful to the council, and removing things that are not terribly valuable, so that way you don't have to spend the time working on those. That would be the only thing I would add to the motion, aside from the staff recommendation. But beyond that, thank you for the work. This was very helpful in giving us some of the projections and assumptions that will go into the development of the next budget. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Vice Mayor. So I hear a motion for the staff recommendation, which includes the 8 items, plus a review of performance measurements to the CPPC. Did I get that right? Okay. All right, Councilmember Matichak.
Second that motion. I have talked to the previous city manager as well as others at City Hall about the metrics many times. I'm big on metrics. And so I absolutely support us taking a look at that, but I feel like clearly the department heads and the city manager will need to be involved because they also know more about the operations than we do. But yes, I absolutely support that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion and we have a second. Councilmember Showalter.
Yeah, I guess as a past civil servant, I'm a little interested in whether or not the performance measures are really to inform the council or to inform sort of staff and department heads about what their jobs are and what the what obvious deadlines and sort of workload requirements they have. Can the city manager talk to that a little bit?
Thank you, Councilmember Showalter. So yes, undertaking a project looking at performance metrics and looking at data and analytics is quite an undertaking. I've done it in other organizations. And you are correct in that a lot of the performance measures do help the individual departments and department heads make decisions. Obviously, depending on what kind of measure it is, if it's an output measure, you're measuring what's happening, what the workload is doing. If it's an outcome measure, you're measuring the impact of the work that staff have. So I think that this is actually a project that would probably take quite a bit of time for the organization to do. And we might want to think about it in terms of on the work plan as a multi-year effort or something that we can work on, because it is something, as was noted, that the department heads and myself would need to be involved in from the operations perspective, and just knowing what it is that we do measure, what we should be measuring, that are going to help the community and obviously help inform decisions that are made. But it is a big lift, and it is important to have those performance measures so that people know how we're performing and how we're serving the community. But it is certainly a big project. So I think if we consider this, it should be part of the work plan effort over the 2-year work plan period.
Okay, Councilmember Showalter, does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, I think that this is really a big effort. It's a good idea, but it isn't a casual thing, like the city manager said. And I don't think that with the sort of never-ending comments we hear of overwork, and that this is the appropriate time to take it on. But it is something that we should think about in the work plan. And perhaps if staff is given some time to think about it, they could come up with a subset or some policies related to it that might be more manageable than going over the whole list for each department. Or maybe we want to do 1 or 2 departments at a time. I don't know, but perhaps we could divide the job into a more manageable more manageable parts than the whole thing. But that would be something I would think that staff should think about and maybe come back to us with as the work plan is developed for next year.
Okay. So hearing that feedback from the city manager and Councilmember Showalter, does the motion maker and the seconder would like to keep their motion or make any amendment to it after the feedback?
So just for my benefit, even if it's not urgent and we just place it on the CPPC work plan as something that we can work on for, you know, a year and a half or 2 years, is that feasible? Because I think the challenge I'm seeing no's. So I guess I think the challenge I have is I think it's important to do, and I'm not anticipating thematic goals that would readily include a review of the performance measures. And I think this is one of those nice things that we'll never do because there's really no way to bring it up. So if there isn't support from the council, then I suppose forwarding it to the goal setting process is okay. But I'd be interested also in the feedback from the seconder of the motion.
Okay. So I saw Councilmember Lieber's hand raised, but Councilmember Matichak as the seconder. Did you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. So I do think it's important to have the city manager and the department heads involved, and I'm fine with it being a work plan project. As you know, but we'd have to prioritize that as we work on our priorities and the projects to support those. But I'm okay with it being moved to that group rather than the CPPC, if others are okay with that. So I guess, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I'm comfortable with what Councilmember Matichak suggested. So it would be in the context of goal setting. Maybe staff can prepare some information about the workload impact, just so we have a sense of what it would entail. But rather than have it as a CPPC work plan item, the council would review it there and hopefully prioritize it.
Okay, so I guess for clarity, and I guess I would look to the city attorney Turpa. So it sounds like we have a motion for the staff recommendation. Council also, at least 2 council members have showed interest in pursuing, how we might be able to review the performance metrics. We've been advised that would be best through goal setting. Do we need to include that in the motion, or would we just wait until the goal setting time?
I think Councilmember Ramirez amended his motion to refer a review of the goal setting process, the performance measures topic, and include that in the goal setting process. That's what I understood, and that's fine to have in the motion.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that the motion was clear, that it's okay with the motion maker and the seconder. And I see their heads nodding. Councilmember Lieber, thank you for your patience as we sorted that out.
So just a clarification, it's in the motion, but as in terms of deferring it, because I'm concerned about the overall weight of the things that we're taking on right now. And I know that we may be in the coming month or two on really difficult footing given COVID and the variants. And I actually take the budget, situation that we're at right now at mid-year pretty seriously, because I think that, anytime your budget lines cross, it's a real warning sign. And so I'm just concerned about the overload situation.
Sorry, Councilmember Matichak.
So maybe the Vice Mayor can clarify, but my interpretation of putting it into the goal setting process was it's a project that we would consider, but as a council, we would have to prioritize it. So we might not.
Okay.
That's my understanding. Is that yours? I see a nodding head. Yeah.
I see a nodding head and a thumbs up. Perfect. Great. Thank you. All right. So do any other council members have comments or questions? Okay, so there is a motion and a seconder. I think we're ready for a roll call vote. Okay.
Councilmember Abekoga.
Aye.
Councilmember Hicks.
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber.
Aye.
Councilmember Matachek.
Yes.
Councilmember Showalter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Yes.
Mayor Kamei.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Now we'll move on to item 8, council, staff, and committee reports. Do any council members have any items under item 8? So I do. Oh, Councilmember Matachek, go ahead.
I think Councilmember Abekoga had her hand up before me.
It looked the same time to me, but it was like right at the same time.
Okay, so I have 2 things. I attended a board meeting of the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, and I don't have a report out on anything that happened at that meeting. They're always interesting. And then I also participated in the Santa Clara County Airport Land Use Commission meeting, and I learned at that meeting that the City of Mountain View is having our planning department get some training on which projects do or do not have to go to the Airport Land Use Commission for a determination of whether or not they are either consistent or inconsistent with the plans for the various airports in the area. And it's very, I find this board very interesting because you have the opportunity to see what other cities are doing in terms of land use planning. And it's, I'll say it's really interesting. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Abekoga.
Thank you. I just wanted to report on a few regional meetings I've been to with VTA, and this has been a while. I don't think we had an opportunity to report out last meeting, but the board had a workshop about its budget, and part of that was a discussion on Measure B funds. As you may recall, there was a initial, presentation about how to fund BART without financing, and that caused a lot of consternation because it looked like other projects would not be funded. Since then, the VTA staff came back with another presentation that would show some financing for the BART project, which would then keep the other funding sources like local streets and so forth that we are very concerned with intact. So this is still a work in progress. The expectation is there'll be more discussion and a decision as we look at adopting their budget in June. Also, as you probably have heard, our general manager, Nuria Fernandez, was tapped to be the Department of Transportation administrator. She's currently deputy, but expected to be the administrator for DOT, which is big for us here in Santa Clara County. As a result, we are engaging in a search for a new GM, and I'm a part of the search committee at this time. As the Cities Association, we set our priorities for the year, and we have 4. They are transportation, housing and homelessness, COVID recovery, and racial justice. And then with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, I was elected chair again for the board this year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So I have many CHAC-related items. Since we last met, I attended our monthly CHAC board meeting, and then we also had a CHAC retreat after our own city council retreat on Saturday. It was a full day of retreats for myself, And CHAC is also, the CHAC Family Resource Center is actually partnering with the Mountain View Library for a Valentine's celebration this Friday from 5:30 to 7 on Zoom, where people will be able to learn how to say I love you in multiple languages. It'll be in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. So it'll be, I think, a nice festive time. And then this past week, we also held our monthly Mayor's Resiliency Roundtable. All right, does anyone have any other comments? All right, so seeing none, we'll move on to item 9, which is a closed session report. City Attorney Chopra?
Yes, there's no closed session report tonight.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so I think this leads to item 10, which is our adjournment. Thanks so much for joining us, and our next regular council meeting will be on February 23rd. Until then, please stay healthy, and our meeting is adjourned at 8:50 p.m. We'll also have a special council meeting this Friday, February 12th at 5 p.m. for our closed session meeting. All right, thank you, everyone. Remember to mask up. Bye.